First of all, we want to thank New York Textile Month for the opportunity to open up the space for us to share and converse about the practices we have been immersed in as a collective, and the practices that intersect with the pursuit and understanding of non-letter knowledge on today's global agenda. On this occasion, we present to you Interwoven Narratives, a Palabreo, which is an event that will take place in 2 sessions today, with a special participation of 5 panelists and invited moderators for the Palabreo at the end of each session. So Interwoven Narratives shatters the boundaries of a traditional conference setup and the formality of screens by establishing transnational connections through a non-structured process called Palabreo, delving into ancestral practices, unconventional practices, and innovative ways of understanding that everything is connected by what we do and believe. So special thanks to the panelists, Piedad Aguilar, Juan Pablo Aschner, Ana Gutierrez, Zayaan and Arcenio Moya, and Andrei Fernandez, who we will introduce in a few minutes, and who will accompany us on a voyage to our origins and the intrinsic bond we share with craftsmanship and creation. So finally, special thanks to the invited moderators and the participants who were able to join this thread of Palabreo. And you're also welcome to make questions through the chat at the end during the Palabreo, and we can also pitch in some of these questions. So a small introduction of Colectivo de Palabreo. So we are a transdisciplinary, We are a transdisciplinary collective of applied research founded in 2022 by Lina Celis, myself, Ruben Gomez, and Leon Duval. We work with traces, renderings, representations, and relationships derived from Latinx culture in different global contexts. So aiming to comprehend, expose, and communicate their impacts and extents through engagements, actions among individuals, collectives, humans, more than humans, and communities, facilitated by the act of palabreo or oral communications. So in this regard, we understand the word palabreo not in its pejorative connotations stemming from the Western and colonializing world of the Americas, but rather from its American and pre-Hispanic significance as an oral and performative means of transmitting knowledge and worldviews. So our journey started with Maíz, which is biographical textiles through the lens of corn. And it was a participatory workshop during New York Textile Month last year at a tamal factory. And after that, we had consecutive online events named Maíz 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we included Nixtamalizaciones, which was an online performance for the School of Design of Universidad Finisterrae in Chile in 2022. And lastly, we presented an interactive exhibition for the Jerusalem Design Week in 2023, and were selected for the Pabellon 2023 in Universidad de los Andes in Colombia. So here's a small presentation. And finally, we did this workshop and storytelling at Le Cordon Bleu in Chile, which was a fusion food and memories, and it was like a participatory online workshop. So now, thank you. These are mostly the questions that we're delving. And we're very excited to have everyone here. As a group in Palabreo, most of our conversations happen between each other, between the 4 of us. And so having the possibility to be able to listen to all of you today is a great experience for us too. So starting with our first panelist, Zayaan Khan is the founder of Seed Bibliothèque, and she lives in Cape Town. And she studied landscape design and horticulture, focusing on green roof systems and their practicality to increase biodiversity as well as food security. Zayaan's career has its basis working in and with organizations working in land reform, agrarian transformation, and food justice. She completed her PhD in the Environmental Humanities South at the University of Cape Town, an interdisciplinary research cluster focused on seeds, from seeds as objects to seeds as relations. Zayaan's work finds a resting place through food as a means of understanding the world, particularly seed, land, and our collective heritage. As an artist, consultant, food transformer, ceramicist, writer, and researcher, working from a social political platform, she understands true meanings of transformation and expression, expressing solutions through the ways in which we consume, from food to medicine, art, cosmetic, or household consumables. Nowadays, Zayaan is building the Seed Bibliothèque, a seed library highlighting the story of seeds. So, Zayaan, welcome.
Hello, everyone. What a pleasure to be here. Tell me, Eliza, and how long do you want me to talk for? Can it be 10 minutes? Longer?
It can be whatever you would like, up to 30 minutes. So,
okay, great. So then let me tell you, then let me talk through the work that I do, and starting off from the perspective of seed, and then towards using maize as the beginning of the story. A couple of years ago in 2017, I was gifted the opportunity to go to Oaxaca to listen to some stories of food as resistance, as a means of understanding the ways to retrieve our indigenous food cultures here in the southwestern Cape of South Africa. Because through all the resistance practices that we have here, food disappeared. And so it was one of the first, or as a means of cultural identity, a lot of our foods come from other lands. And so it was that deep interrogation, which often leads you very quickly to stories of great grief, of the genocides that occurred here, stemicides that exist here. And so using food and using seed as a tool to retrieve this and reclaim this and revive this is very necessary. And so having that experience in Oaxaca, following the story of agave, with Doña Reina Sanchez, who's a maestra of mezcal, and farms and breeds agave, and then looking at the story of maize. That was one of the other ones. And so being deeply entrenched to understand how maize in the Americas is so co-evolved in the culture of the people, and that maize lives at a beautiful liminal borderland frontier Nepantla space, that speaks to spiritual and cultural knowings around the fact that maize is trans everything, and can be referred to as, you know, is ungendered or has genders at different phases of maize's life. And this is very interesting for us because with many of the farmers that I've worked, majority, I mean, I would say like 80% of the farmers that I've worked with and the food practitioners I've worked with on the African continent over the last 20 years, all recognize maize as African, that maize is an indigenous food of Africa, which is so peculiar because it means that maize has been in our collective heritage and our collective memory, that we don't remember a time before maize. And maize is treated like the guest on the farm, where, you know, maize gets the best space, and because it's not from here, it requires the best, like, fertile access and the best you know, access to water, and maize is the favorite child, put it that way. And many times this is such an expensive crop to grow because it requires so much more than sorghum or millet or something else that is from here. But if something is so far back in our collective memory, that's how we also tell our stories of origin, and that's how we also know our connection to land. And so it was such an intriguing case, because if we start to think of it, maize traveled here by boat, roughly the 1500s, and there's these small kind of ethnographic evidence of all of these things and archival evidence. But it is that maize traveled, you know, with these ghost stories where we don't really have the practice of nixtamalization. We do not, we will grind the seed, the hard seed, into a powder and just make a paste from that, or make a masa from that in some cases, but it's, you will always need to cut it with wheat because it doesn't have that glutinous glory that the nixtamal gives it. Maize traveled here without the story of being in the milpas to be part of the three sisters. So maize is often grown alone. It's only recently that generally, in some cases, you do find it being grown with beans and squash and so on. But these are two examples of some of the ghost stories that maize traveled here with, and new stories were created and new stories were built. And this is, I think, a very intriguing way of thinking about these issues and being able to turn them into stories that we can work with and we can use and understand the reality of where we need to go from here. Understanding that we exist in such a polycrisis and crisis of crisis. I must ask forgiveness. There's a construction happening very close by me, and this is the quietest space, unfortunately, while my son is sleeping. And so part of that work is, in the broader land and food and seed context, is to think about, because South Africa has kind of double colonization, we have, well, I guess even triple. We've got initially Dutch and then British, and then this Afrikaner, which would have been people who were born here or who had come here as young people from Europe and colonized this land, and who were the architects of apartheid. And so we have this consistent erasure of indigeneity and indigenous history and story. And in the spaces of resistance where identity could be fostered and where it wasn't illegal just to be, you find strong threads of this identity, and you find the weaving of these narratives into a general culture of this land that is obvious today. For example, some of the fishing, evidences of fishing, etc. But a lot of it has been killed, right? And so a lot of it is in the situation where cultural practices and cultures of practice and community cultures of practice are extinct. And case in point is seed. And one of the intriguing things is that in a large part of the world, but we're dealing with it pretty heavily here in the continent, in a similar way that Latin America is dealing with it, are these insane seed laws that have come into play from Europe and kind of governing our breeding, governing our phytosanitary, criminalizing traditional seed. And so when we found out about this in 2012, we, as an organization, the organization was working with, we started a research project about trying to see what the reality was. If traditional seed is being criminalized and erased, what is the reality that we are dealing with the farmers and fisher people that we are working with, and the other peasants that we're working with? And what we found was that if people were, like, the vast majority of people were not, forgive me for the sound, the vast majority of people were not saving seed, and obviously not one person knew about the seed laws, but the reality was that the more disconnected from cities and towns people were, the more viable their seed culture was, the more practical aspects of seed culture they had around storing seed, about breeding seed, the recipes that go with it, etc. The passing on of the knowledge within the community to the children. But when people were closer to supermarkets, when people were closer to telecommunications, that fell away, and people just bought seed from the supermarket. And so what happens with this is that then you don't have those traditional practices of the different ways of saving seed, etc., which is then linked into the recipes and the ways that we care for each other, and the way that we care for land, and the way that we understand our time. And so my job then became to work with the communities that we were working with around, who were farming, around understanding how we could begin a seed culture, which is very hard work because it's a completely different way of farming, a different time scale, a different labor profile than the traditional way that they were doing by buying seed in. And so it became this whole thing where we were feeling like we were racing against the clock, because these laws are coming in to criminalize seed, but we don't have any seed to save. So what is the next 20, 30, 50, 100 years going to look like in terms of seed? Is it really annoying? For me, it sounds super loud. Is it okay?
We can't hear any sounds.
Oh, great. So yeah. I'm good.
You're perfect.
Okay. Amazing. That's so great to hear. Okay, so yeah, so then I, in my kind of neurodivergent, obsessive ways, began to think of, okay, well, if there's this, I forget what the word is, maybe binary or dichotomy, where we have corporations and governments on the one side governing these laws and governing the fact that now we're criminalizing these people and their seed, compared to these, very extremely rural, poorest of the poor farmers and people within the rural livelihood against these big corporations and governments. It was as if it was the one and the other, and there was this huge canyon between the two. And so it was like the kind of us against the world. It was so uneven, but it didn't make sense to me, because these are the people who are the most marginalized in these laws, but there are millions of other people who are using seed. There are other seed businesses, there are gardeners, there are other kind of farmers who are not the poorest of the poor, or like most extreme rural. And so where were those people? And what we then did was, so it's basically understanding that we had this huge gap. We needed to fill the gap to fully understand what the kind of lay of the land was, that if we needed to hustle justice work, if we needed to tap into a community, then we could. And so basically, how do you revive a seed culture that is a cultural community of practice? And so we started, the first opportunity we had friends who were farming on a piece of military land, and they had occupied it for many generations, over 40 years at that stage. That they were at risk of being forced off the land. And so we decided we were going to occupy, and the way that we were going to occupy was to have a massive market. And so there was like vintage stores, food sellers, whatever. And we decided, as this kind of group of active youth working around food, we decided we were going to have a seed table and do a pop-up seed library. And we just put notices out on Facebook, literally just on Facebook, maybe a few WhatsApps, and set up the table in our collective with all the seeds that all of us had. And people came from all around the district, even outside the district, with whatever seed they had. I don't even know a lot of the people that came. So it was like friends of friends of friends. And it was so obvious very quickly that the beauty and the care, the beautiful care that people had for their seeds, where they would come, like draw beautiful like tekenings, like drawings on to show what the seed was, beautiful pictures of grenadilla and the fruit and the leaf, and then like flowers, or they would write a little story about where it was from, or they would donate seed that wasn't even viable anymore. I got seed we were laughing about it, that was 40 years old, but someone kept it for 40 years and it meant something to them. So we decided we were going to accept everything that people wanted to donate, even if it wasn't plantable. And we then started looking at, okay, but then what are the other ways that people are using seeds? And of course, as soon as you start to think about it, it just opens up into this whole, well, we've co-evolved with seed. Seed is everywhere. Seed is cotton in the clothing that I wear. Seed is in the majority of my breakfast, from my bread to my coffee. Seed is in the dyes that we have in our clothing. Seed is in our jewelry. Seed is in our teethers for our babies. It is, you know, in our musical instruments. And we just don't notice it maybe. And so being able to kind of pull those threads out of those stories and see the ways in which we kind of weave our ways of knowing and revive our ways of knowing. It's not that it went extinct. It's often that we've just forgotten. And so how do you remember? How do you remember? And how do you pull those memories from the ancestry? How do you pull it out? And so that's been the majority of the work, and that's the PhD, which isn't finished actually. It's still ongoing, but that's those stories of the practitioners. I mean, now the Seed Bibliothek is a real place that's outside of my home. It's in a building that's accessible to other people, and it's a collective seed library that others are involved in, and we have collective events. So it's remarkable that it is where it is. And the dream is to have our very own building and not being in another person's building. That has a garden that we can be cultivating, and, you know, a studio that we can build seed vessels and make instruments, and, you know, take the fibers from the plants and weave textile. And in each of these practices, to be able to keep that oral tradition, keep that, I mean, it's weaving is the perfect metaphor for that, because it's the continual practice and the continual storytelling that weaves and intertwines through community members to build broader communities. And hopefully go from strength to strength. But it really is one of the very many in the world, but examples of how to revive and you know, enliven those cultural practices that we suspected were extinct. Thank you very much.
Oh my God. Yeah, wow. Zayaan, I don't know if I have the presentation you sent me early this morning. And I don't know if you want me just to, you know, like to go through the presentation to see like most of the, for example, like some of the slides, like, you know, like showing like all of the gatherings and, you know, like these like small pieces that are so beautiful.
You're welcome to, if there's time, and also maybe during the question and answers, if, you know, that can also be shown. There's a lot of slides, but any of them to see is a good.
Okay, let me just like do like yeah, like a quick show.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to show them now. And what I do recommend is people writing down questions. I'm doing that right now. So
just let me know if you want me to stop. Or
I think it's good pace. Meanwhile, it's going quickly. I'll just speak to some of the examples. It's just incredible how sometimes people keep seed. You can keep going, huh? You can keep showing them how the ways that people keep seed. This was a game that we did with the children where we used seeds as color. But some of the seeds are like one of the collections that you saw in the little vials, that was a friend of mine who's an archaeologist, and these are all the seeds that she works with as an ethnobotanist who is an archaeologist, thinking about indigenous food and the kind of seeds that are found, the kind of plants that are found around like sites that historically have been settled. So our ancient ancestors that were found around the caves, or that we know were used for eating, or whatever the case is. And just, you know, the different ways that we know about indigenous food and the work we've had to do so. This was one of the clay play days we had when we were thinking about seed as architecture and looking at the forms and shapes and materiality of seed and how we can utilize that in our sculptural work. Seed as architecture has also been a beautiful chapter to write within the thesis. Yeah, so this is an example of that. So this is one of the ways to revive that, right? Making tangible, using the earth to speak through to these ways of knowing. This was just a seed lunch, different dal and beans and lentils. We've got them in the cooked form. And then there's rice, obviously, as well, which is a seed, and then in their raw form. And this was an example for, it was a children's home where children, it's not an orphanage, but where children aren't able to live with their families. And so we did a celebration of seed with them. And so this was just to show them the different ways. Here, seeds as instruments, seeds that we can eat. There's some carob, some fluffy orange seed in the middle. There's raw and cooked rice. Because these children, because they grow up in a children's home, they don't really have agency around food or going to the shops. Everything is done for them. So this was just like simple examples of how to talk about these things to young people. Painting with seeds. And these are all indigenous seeds. Again, some indigenous food. Just some of the care, the ways that people package their seed, and everyone else that uses seed, all the insects, not just us. This is in Guelatao, outside Oaxaca. This is an example of a jeweler who uses exclusively seed to make their jewelry. I think that's the last image, huh? Ah. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Oh my God.
Thank you, Zayaan.
Thank you, Zayaan. That was incredible. Very inspiring.
So now we will present Ana Maria Gutierrez. She is the founder of Organismo, and she lives currently in Colombia. As initial steps, Ana earned a BFA in architectural design from Parsons School of Design in New York City, and a Master's of Interactive Telecommunications, ITP, from the New York University. She discovered the power of action and community building, giving rise to Organismo, a research center focused on regeneration and the exchange of intercultural knowledge. moved by the delicate strength of local knowledge and resources, they create experiences around research for the development of sustainable habitats. Their love for the earth as a building material, along with an awareness of the need to revive vernacular earth as a building material, architecture in rural areas of Colombia leads them to become an explorer and facilitator of possible worlds, creating new paradigms of spatiality where infrastructure serve as an invitation to engage in dialogue with the non-human and the creation of new rituals. So, Ana Maria, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm gonna try to tell the story as concise as possible. Basically, the beginning of this empirical path was the earth construction, earth as a construction material, and that took me to learn from it, really from the rural development, where you can actually, it's the only place where you can learn how to build with earth. And that made me had to go to very different ethnic communities to learn not only about earth, but about other fibers and raw materials of constructions and the way that vernacular architecture actually exists. 15 years ago, I started this NGO called Organismo, like you said, and Organismo nowadays is a conversation between a center of investigation for regeneration and intercultural studies in the outskirts of Bogota, where we design educational programs as well as sustainable habitats, low impact technologies and techniques, and we accompany processes of co-creation in the communities. So this is a constant dialogue. What we learn in the communities in the different ethnic groups that we support and we accompany, and what happens in the educational models that we design. I want to share. Can I share a screen? Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
So what I'm going to show you right now is a little bit of what we do in the center as a ecological restoration or sustainable habitat programs or cultural expression programs, and what happens in the communities that were invited to participate. So here we go, I guess. Okay. So this is the center. This is how we've been building it for the last 15 years through workshops. Again, there are 3 departments. One is sustainable habitats, where we teach low impact techniques and technologies. There's the Department of Ecological Restoration, where we teach everything regarding improving the soils, agroforestry systems, food security, biodynamic agriculture. And then there is the Department of Cultural Expressions. And then our schools is what you're seeing. Our schools are the communities. We work in the Amazon, in the Orinoquia region, in the Pacific area. And we create also programs of cultural immersion in each community. So we learn from each craft. I'm gonna keep showing you another process that changed. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
This was not the one that I wanted to show you. Give me 1 second. Stop. Wait. 1 second. So what happened 3 years ago? What happened 3 years ago is that from all the experiences that we were learning from the different communities, we decided to start building our own house of thought, because we realized that we were sure enough that we can work with the local resources and knowledge in each territory We have a lot of beautiful experiences with communities, and we know that if we work with the local resources and knowledges, beautiful things are going to happen. But there were a lot of interconnections as humans missing for us to really understand what are we part of. So we decided to start building our own house of thought, or intercultural temple. That was 3 years ago, and we created an educational program that was a diploma of 3 months with people with no prerequisites, like we always do. And we did an immersion of the different, I mean, we were inspired of the different ethnicities of our country, and of course, the immense cultural patrimony that we have. We were in love with understanding the cosmovisions of different communities and how they were shown in their architecture. We understood the need of revisiting how are we actually creating and proposing intercultural projects. What is exactly the care that we have to have with our own thoughts and words? How do we actually start involving the plants of power, the entities of the territory, the alchemy of the fire into how we inhabit? And for sure, and the most thing is, how do we start creating rituals to start rooting this sense of belonging? So we did like a 2-year investigation of these ethnicities and the architecture of the houses of thought. And we fell in love with sacred geometry, especially the shape of the torus. And we were trained by our friend Jaime Peña, that is a Colombian architect that lives in Mexico, in this specific technique that is bamboo laminated beams. And we built this house of thought that has changed our way of thinking, definitely, and our way of approaching what we understand as regeneration, socially, culturally, and ecosystem-wise. We're still in this constant dialogue between educational programs and the knowledge of the ancestral communities that we work with. We believe that, again, the manifestation, the sustainable settlements, the co-creation ends up happening at the end, but we need to root more these intercultural dialogues. We really need to start behaving in a non-colonialist way, in a non-assistentialist way. Every time we try to co-create intercultural scenarios. So a little bit, this has been our goal the last 3 years. Our emphasis is local resources and knowledges. We work in the areas of sustainable habitats, ecological restoration, and cultural expressions. Cultural expressions actually being how we actually read the connection between culture and territory. Cultural expression are the songs, the food, the weaving, the ceramic, everything that comes out of a culture expresses the interconnection with the territory, and that's our book. And we've been understanding that as a hybrid culture, we do need to recover our rituals. These are different ethnic groups, let's say modern and ancestral communities that have come to light the fire with us in the House of Thought to help us rebuild this sense of belonging. Thank you very much. Let's okay, stop sharing. Okay. So thank you very much for this little space to share.
Thank you, Ana. Thank you for being here and share what you have done with Organismo. I know that you have to go, but if someone has any question that wanted to ask Ana Maria, that will be great in this moment. We can maybe do like a little 10 minutes question. So that will be great. I don't know, I can start with this question that I have, that I know that you have been working with a lot of indigenous communities along Colombia. And I wanted to ask you how do you see, like, in maybe in an everyday practice, the way that we can share that learned knowledge that you have gained with Organismo, and how you can share that with I don't know, as a way to share that knowledge to everyday practices, apart from rituals that we can incorporate.
So part of sharing for me is the understanding that we need to incorporate our body, we need to embody our processes of knowledge, and we need to go through experiences. I completely believe this new paradigm of education, we have to stop talking about theory, and we have to understand our interconnections as humans, with non-humans, with ecosystems. So the way that I try to share what moves me, without naming it as an ancestral knowledge or as a connection with nature or as a title, is what we do in Organismo, that is creating experiences where we can have develop tactile memories between humans and local resources. The moment that we ourselves get involved with our body in a process with a natural resource, water, a weaving technique, an earth construction, in that moment you're going to start embodying in your own essence something. And that's the only way that we think we can share what moves us, through vivid experiences that involve humans and natural resources. The moment that you're part of this process, you're going to understand that everything is related to a life cycle, that everything is related to a need of shelter, and that everything is deeply rooted to an understanding of habitat in each culture in very different ways. And then your essence, your soul, is going to come into a process, a vivid process, create a tactile memory, embody an experience, and then get your own understanding of belonging or of being part of, or of a life cycle. And that's the only way that I think knowledge can be, or knowledge or a vision or a passion can be shared, and it's through a human interaction, human to nature, human to an understanding of habitat.
Thank you. Completely understand your point of view, and I think we also share that. We have thought, because three of us are architects for definition, and one of us is a designer also by definition, but we thought, like, by conversations, and in your case by experiences, we can also share what like each of us has, and those experiences can be also shared in a way that we can find in points of intersection. And I think that's very valuable, that you are bringing the idea that we really need to experience in order to gain memories, tactile memories. That is the way that we have been carrying all that we know. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, listening to you, to how we present ourselves as designers or architects or artists, I think part of the initial discussion is to unlearn our ways of presenting our expertise, that especially comes in dividing with everything. I know about this, and that, for a starter, is dividing an expertise from another and creating a segregated world with binary concepts and with a lot of limitations. So, and for starters, from what I've seen in my experience, collective processes of regeneration and sustainability can be very successful. If collectivity has a momentum, will be very successful. But we do keep making we keep perpetuating these colonialist ways, because our initial dialogues of proposing projects or of co-creation starts from my know-how is this, and I come here with this. And this is the main thing, and this creates the biggest gap from the initial part of any woven possible interaction, that we come thinking that we know, and come thinking that we know from an eloquence, from Western epistemologies, and then we arrive to any conversation. It doesn't have to be with indigenous communities. This indigenous communities title has a lot of exoticization, you know, and it's just the other, you know. We come to the other always with a perception of a know-how, and that I come to teach in the worst case scenario, which is the 99%, or I come with a certainty, and that is blindness zone that we keep perpetuating, and then we keep creating programs or projects or proposals or theories of manifest from our own heads. And what we need to create is new listening technologies with the non-human. This is where we start to really understand that we will always arrive, no matter how alike we look or not, to scenarios where we really need to silence ourselves and understand if we can listen from a different sense.
Super. Ana Maria, I also have a question to you. Well, of course, listening to you talking about this binary world we are inhabiting, and specifically like Zayaan or you are talking about this understanding, this intertwined understanding, interrelation and collaborative and approaches to design, understanding the world, etc. Pretty much the opposition to other ideas, particularly Western ideas. Also, that's kind of a binary conception. So my question is how to deal with this. Mainly two approaches, might be other ones, but there's a position or a side that is like this understanding of an intertwined world, or a need to understand an intertwined and a collaborative and non-positivist world in a way, but how to deal or how to talk or how to negotiate with the others, in this case, the neoliberal or industrialized, or the one that is creating this otherness in us, not an, I don't know, in us, but in this other way. How would you think or understand or theorize or speculate about the relationship should be? There should be one, or it's impossible to be one?
I don't know if I understood the question.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm gonna phrase it to see if I can get the most out of it. We're talking about two worlds, Western epistemologies and ancestral knowledges.
For example, or Oriental Western in the broader sense.
I mean, how I feel it is that we do have to start from the starting point of understanding that we are a hybrid collection of epistemologies. I mean, I for example, me, I'm for sure I have the blessing to be able to be in contact with an ancestral knowledge, but I have indigenous in my blood, but I'm not born and raised as an indigenous person. And I was studied in New York, so I was raised Western. So we are a very complex hybrid culture. So if we start by accepting this, full of contradictions, then we can understand where in our time and space incarnation in this life we're at, right? We can see realities of others that are born and raised as an ancestral, that have a strong lineage on a lot of other non-human dialogues, and we can see also Western-rooted epistemology beings that have no understanding of others. But as I perceive myself and where I move is we are a hybrid culture full of contradictions, right? So starting from a point of view, I'm not stating that that there's one way of seeing or doing. I think that where we have to arrive is to understand these woven possible dialogues between Western epistemology, high-end technology, and the present active ancestral knowledges that we do have to protect because they are in a very fragile situation. The less that we see us different, the more interconnections that we're going to start to understand. One other thing that I see constantly in our perceptions is that we believe that ancestrality is this romantic past, you know? Oh, and that when we talk about ancestrality, something we want to go back to live in the fields and have no light, and which actually exists. But ancestrality for me is a vivid present, very fragile, vivid present, that is actually teaching us the resilience to keep fighting to develop or maintain our own manifestos of belonging. For me, that is ancestrality. It's not a romantic past. It's something actually in a constant fight, in an amazing resilience of sustaining their own rituals and their own beliefs and their protections of the territory in their way for decades. A pesar de, how do you say a pesar de? A pesar de years and years and years of abuse, and years of misconceptions and progress, of evolution and stigmatizations of all of their high-end technologies. So what we need to find is how to, of course, as a starting point, acknowledge and honor an origin, for starters, to jump into Western technologies and epistemologies. From my understanding, the first thing, and that only happens through vivid experiences. You can only understand an origin or an idea of an origin if you go in and you live it in your body. So if we're able to understand that this ancestrality is a constant reminder of resilience for us to find our own interconnections and rooting of presence, and then that we have to honor that origin and understand that origin, then we can jump into innovation and we can jump into understanding our own hybridity and complexity of Western epistemologies, and of course innovate, and of course bring technology to all of this in favor of this honoring the origin. So I don't know if I answered that question, but I thought that was...
Yeah, well, it was a really broad question, in fact, but yeah, it's really interesting the last part you said, like it's a matter of self-understanding, self-understanding ourselves before establishing their interconnections and tools set in the world, like to know what we are, or at least what we are not. I don't know, but kind of so yeah.
Especially because us as Westerners or educated in this Western world, we, without wanting, of course, and knowing, we have extractivist behaviors in words, in manifestos with beautiful titles nowadays and beautiful greenwashing and sustainable titles. But we keep behaving in extremely anthropocentric, extractivist, colonialist ways, but with a huge heart and with the most beautiful thing. But we start, so if we don't change our way of understanding presence and new listening technologies and the possibility of new dialogues, it will be very difficult to understand what origin are we trying to honor, what origin of what, you know, because there's so many of you know, so many cultural expressions that have so many hidden powerful energies, so many, all the medicine, you know, oh, everything has so many profound origins. So if we get to understand what we're honoring, and we honor it throughout the process, then it will be very fragile, this way of not perpetuating these extractivist ways of, oh, now I understand this, and now this is mine, and this understanding that if the danger of making knowledge another way of colonization, you know, and then understanding that knowledge is something that we can put a name on it and then talk in the name of ancestrality or indigenous community or a cultural expression of profound knowledge, and then bring it to the Western world in a not respectful way.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I could keep hegemonizing the speaker, but I would like to give the word to somebody else who could want to say or ask something.
I just want to give kudos, Anna Maria. I'd love to connect with you further. I'm also trained as an architect and in that process of unlearning. So I really appreciate it. I think you showed a lot of different ways of beginning to reframe our role as designers in that process. I have a lot of questions about when we, as architects, right, we're given sites, right, to begin to act upon, right, and deploy visions, right, and so I wonder, I have a lot of questions around the sites that are chosen and those relations to an ecology and to community and those rituals, and maybe if you could talk a little bit more about that as well too.
So the ideal situation is that the community itself invites you, you know, and that you arrive to what you're calling a chosen site as an invitation to share from the people who inhabit it. I don't know if this is exactly the scenario that you're asking about, but that's how chosen sites come to us, you know, in an ideal way. It's either because of the community invitation or because another NGO is working on it on different areas like food security or health, and then they want to push a co-creation process, and then they call us in, and we enter as listeners and as facilitators, and we see architecture as the possibility to show the abundance of all languages in the territory. And that's where we're at. We never come with a project, with a plan, with nothing. We come to understand, and therefore the way that we have to design a setting in order to translate how we work to someone else is we do have we do title the moments, no? So we first go through a becoming no one moment. Then we arrive to a listening technology moment. Then we arrive to a voicing the territories moment. Then we arrive to an intercultural dialogue. After we've become no one, we've entered, we've listened. And then we've found or not a dialogue that we can be part of. And then we start creating what we call roots of action towards regenerative social initiatives that are actually social initiatives that are happening already, that do not depend on us, that do not come from us. We just enter to facilitate. You know, we are at service of the abundance that we see that is infinite. And then once we create this route of action towards regeneration, social, cultural ecosystem, whatever the potential is, or everything, hopefully, then we create what we call living schools, escuelas vivas. This is for us the frame of work. Any intervention, it could be a dry bathroom, it could be a little house, it could be a kitchen, has the potential of becoming a living school. And a living school means that you can organize it as an architectural program if that's what the community wants, to learn foundation, wood, weaving, water collection systems. It could be a broader living school that goes into ecological restoration, which ecological restoration and sustainable habitats are always together because we're working with plant material that we need to plant in order to keep building from it. So it's kind of like that. Those moments are framed. We never know what happens after that moment. We can not find any connection at the beginning. And each moment needs to be stopped and questioned and reframed the next one. So it's a process of a process with no clarity on the deliverable, but a huge potential.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's really lovely to talk through that process of working, and I think it reframes our tools and how we're trained to be designers, right? And those skills of facilitation, right, are not something that we learn within Western design practices, right? So I really appreciate that. Thank you, Maria.
And just to frame, the most important thing about learning from how we were taught is no project-based, no deliverables. We are trying to create and understand humankind interconnections and the possibility of creating well-being, like planetary well-being. And we have no idea how to do it, and it's not a recipe. So it's a matter of that we have the trust and the chance of entering process-based approaches.
Thank you, Ana Maria.
No, muchas gracias. I'm sorry I have to run, but it was a pleasure, this invitation. And I will look for the recording, and I hope to see you guys soon.
Thank you very much. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Bye, Ana Maria. Gracias.
Gracias.
Elisa?
Yes. So our last panelist is Andrei Fernandez. She's a curator, independent researcher, and cultural manager. She holds a bachelor degree in fine arts at UNT with studies in social and political anthropology at Flaxo. She has curated numerous exhibitions in independent spaces, museums, and art galleries in various locations across Argentina, Paraguay, Germany, and Portugal. Her research focuses on ancestral technologies and collective memories. She supports artists who reflect on identity and authorship. She has initiated intercultural projects that bring together artists, artisans, and activists. In 2022, she served as a curator for the 110th Visual Arts Salon of the Ministry of Culture of Argentina, organized by the Palais de Glace. She has awarded the Fuentes Fellowship by the Argentine Embassy in the United Kingdom and the Anglo-Argentine Society to undertake a residency at the Delfina Foundation in London at the beginning of 2023. She co-coordinates alongside curator Michael Deminger and artist Alejandra Mihraji the research and knowledge exchange project called Textiles Seeds, or Textil Semilla, which is part of the 99 Questions program of the Humboldt Forum in Berlin. She resides in the city of Salta in Argentina. Welcome, Andrei.
Hola, bueno, gracias por la invitación. I prefer speaking in Spanish. Voy a hablar en mi idioma.
You
Bueno,
can,
yo
oh,
les
sorry, Andre. If you want to activate the captions, you are welcome. I think on the screen, on the settings on the Zoom, you can set the captions.
And also
Andre?
a quick parenthesis. Leon is going to go translating while Andre talks. So we will go doing small gaps of exchange.
Yeah, just a quotation. Me and Ruben, we're going to be jumping.
Okay, super.
And I'll be sharing, Andre, your presentation. Voy a compartir tu presentación. Cualquier cosa me vas diciendo más rápido, más lento, lo que necesites.
Bien. Bueno, espero que funcione mi conexión, que es un poco inestable. Bueno, yo traje para contarles el trabajo que estoy realizando junto a tejedoras desde el norte de Argentina.
I bring the collection of images about what I'm
¿Me
doing
escuchan?
with the tejedoras in Argentina.
I think we just lost Andre for a bit. I mean, we can see the screen, but
yeah, let's wait a little bit.
Sorry.
Andre, hola.
Oh, perdón.
Andre,
Conexión es muy mala hoy.
si puedes apagar la cámara, tal vez
mejora la conexión.
Súper.
Bien. Bueno, traje para contarles sobre el trabajo que estamos haciendo con tejedoras indígenas y campesinas desde el norte de Argentina.
I bring you the images of the work we are doing with the tejedoras, indigenous and campesinas. How you say that?
Like
Rurales.
peasants, rural communities.
People at rural communities in Argentina. Thank you.
Yo trabajo hace 8 años en la zona argentina del Gran Chaco americano, que si pasas, Elisa, la diapositiva, pueden ver el mapa.
Yeah, I have been working since 8 years in the place called El Chaco in Argentina. That's the area where she's working.
Que es en el límite con Paraguay y Bolivia.
It's in the border between Bolivia and Paraguay.
Allá trabajo especialmente con comunidades del pueblo Wichí. Que
I work with the community of the Pueblo Wichí. Sorry.
Perdón. Sí, pueblo Wichí, que viven en el monte, en el bosque.
They live in the forest and in the hill area.
Estas mujeres hacen tejidos con una planta que se llama chawar, que es una bromelia.
They net with a plant called chawar.
Esta es la planta del chawar, ahí está el nombre científico. Y siempre han hecho tejidos, este pueblo en particular, para cargar alimentos y para guardar cosas.
They have done this work since many years to store food and things.
And to carry them.
Gracias. Entonces, cuando yo llegué allá, me encontré con la pregunta de las mujeres que decían, ¿qué podemos hacer con esto? ¿No? Ante el avance del capitalismo y la necesidad de tener dinero, aparecía la opción de vender estos tejidos, pero no sabían cómo y dónde.
Then, by the advance of the capitalism in the region, the question was, what should we do with this? Should we start selling these products, or something else.
Entonces, como yo venía de trabajar desde el campo del arte, como artista, como curadora, como gestora, empezamos a pensar cómo se podían vincular ellas con ese mundo.
And I, as coming from the art part or the art sphere, we started to talk about how can we work together, how can we merge this understanding by different fields.
Ahí es que trabajé en un proyecto que llamé La Escucha y los Vientos, en la que hicimos una exposición en Berlín, en una institución pública, empezando a probar cómo se podía habitar ese mundo del arte sin forzar a que las cosas que ellas hacen se llamen obras de arte o ellas se llamen a sí mismas artistas.
Then we developed a presentation called La Escucha y el Viento. It's the hearing and the wind, and we presented in Berlin in Germany. And the whole idea about this was to how to put this knowledge without understanding as art, because wasn't art at the beginning.
Este es el proceso que a mí me interesa y me interesó acompañar estos años, de reflexionar cómo se puede pensar, o sea, aprender a qué se le llama arte, pero también apropiarse, ¿no?, de ese concepto y resignificarlo desde el lugar donde ellas viven y desde su cultura.
Part of the process was how to deal with the appropriation, resignification of words or meanings like art, and how to bring this concept of art to the communities, and how to deal and imbricate that concept.
Elisa, si puedes pasar, por favor, así. Me encontré con que ellas hacían este tipo de bolsas en las que aparecían otros diseños, otras imágenes que no son los ancestrales, los antiguos. Entonces ahí empezamos a trabajar en una nueva etapa junto con un artista argentino del norte de Argentina, Guido Llanito.
And then this type of images started to appear in the community, like brought by other context. And then they start to work with the, ¿cuál es el nombre de la persona, perdón?
Guido Llanito.
With Guido Llanito.
Que es un artista que trabaja con textiles también hace muchos años. Entonces empezamos a trabajar en esta unión de mundos y en producciones que podríamos llamar interculturales.
And they started to work
Ahí a
together
continuación
because
hay
Guido,
unas imágenes de la exposición.
And they started to work together because Guido was also a textile designer, and they were trying to understand how they can merge these two worlds into a different kind of practice. And this is images from the presentation, the exhibition, sorry.
Okay. Y también nos pareció importante en esta aproximación, en esta visita al mundo del arte, estén presentes mensajes de los vientos, le llamo yo poéticamente, pero son de los ancestros, ¿no? de la memoria colectiva, porque todas estas producciones nosotros podemos leerlas como bellas o como arte, pero son gestos de resistencia y de defensa de los territorios y las memorias.
These images, these textiles hanging in this room are showing, can be shown two things, like on the one hand, can be shown like a beautiful and aesthetic matters or things, but at the same time, there is showing resistance images and resistance meanings produced by these communities through the time and the different environments. I don't know how to say that. Please.
Thank you. I know it's so difficult to translate.
It's my first time.
Bueno, en las próximas imágenes pueden ver también otros trabajos, este que está hecho como las bolsas, pero a gran escala, que es como más digerible para el público de arte, poder verlo como una obra. Lo que las mujeres tejedoras dicen es, para nosotras es lo mismo, es como hacer un zoom que ustedes necesitan para que esto cambie de valor.
This image is showing the same pattern that is used in the tote bags, but in a broader image size, and that could be more understandable for the common people, but for the artisans, but for the people that is making this, is pretty much the same thing, but only with a zoom, and they understand that Occidental people needs this type of images to understand the value or give value to these images, but for them are pretty much the same.
Bueno, y también ahí pueden ver otras imágenes donde están los textiles que hicieron después este grupo de mujeres que en un primer momento tuvo un nombre que fue Tañí, que significa monte en su idioma, y después cambiaron de nombre cuando se separó ese grupo, y hoy se llaman Silat, que en el idioma wichí significa mensaje.
Sorry, I got this. I got distracted. Ruben, can you help me in this one?
I can get it. I get it. Okay, so this work that they made is called, first was called Tañí, that means a mountain or a hill, and later on it was renamed to be Silak, that is in Wichí language, that means message.
Gracias. También expusimos estas piezas de los tejidos de grandes dimensiones en el territorio donde viven las mujeres, en el monte, que es la manera en la que nosotros llamamos al bosque, ¿no? Son tierras bajas.
And we also expose these pieces in the communities, in the hills, in places called on the forest, because those are like lowlands. Yeah.
Thank you. Bueno, y lo que voy a ir un poco más rápido para no hacerlo tan largo. Posteriormente lo que hicimos fue seguir mostrando estas piezas y seguir fortaleciendo esa manera de hacer, pero sin dejar de lado el hacer objetos utilitarios.
Okay,
Elisa?
so they continue doing this work in the community, but they kept going doing things that weren't utilitarian objects, but more like in this big format.
Porque también una pregunta que aparece, o sea, si bien está la necesidad de pensar en el valor y que esos trabajos puedan tener un valor no solo simbólico, que ya lo tiene para su pueblo, simbólico para el mundo occidental, pero que también tenga un valor monetario, es importante, es urgente, pero por otro lado, el sentido de ese tejer siempre ha sido para que sea parte de la vida, para usarlo, ¿no? En el cuerpo, sobre todo, ¿no? Para cargar cosas. Entonces, no queremos que esa demanda, esa necesidad de dinero y de que se conozca ese saber no anule el sentido antiguo, ¿no? Que atraviesa ese hacer.
So these weaving works have carried a lot of meaning through the years for the communities, but they also wanted to incorporate the monetary value, but not with like to take the monetary value as the whole, and not giving it like the importance that today it carries, because this work it's also a way to carry what they have been doing before and how it is part of the everyday things that they need, like for example to carry the work on the body and to protect the body. So they wanted to balance both. So that was the question in that point.
Gracias. Bueno, acá hay algunas imágenes que podemos pasarlas un poquito más rápido, que son de los episodios de cuando mostramos los tejidos, y también aparecen, hay otros grupos, no trabajo solamente con tejedoras, sino también con ceramistas, y también hemos trabajado haciendo registros de memorias orales.
So there she's showing other work that she has been doing with communities that also make or work with ceramic. And there is also another example how that can also carry another meaning.
Esto es parte de este proyecto que les comentaba que se llama La Escucha de los Vientos, y ahora les voy a contar un poco del nuevo proyecto en el que estamos trabajando, que se llama Textiles como Semillas. Bueno, tomamos por supuesto la metáfora de la semilla como algo que va a transformarse, ¿no? Y crecer. Podemos pasar, Elisa, si querés, más rapidito esta parte.
She's showing, Andrea is showing the last work that she has been doing, but also she integrates the new one that is called Textiles as Seeds, or Textiles Semillas, Textiles Semillas. And here she wants to talk about how the seed, or like the metaphor, or how the seed also carries a meaning.
En este proyecto estoy trabajando con Alejandra Misraji, que es una artista del norte de Argentina, de Tucumán, donde crecí y estudié arte. Ella viene trabajando desde hace varios años con diferentes tejedoras como investigadora y como docente, y también como artista. Entonces, a partir de ver cómo ella está resolviendo su obra como artista, y también el trabajo que está haciendo con este grupo, que aquí se ven algunas imágenes, que se llaman Randeras del Cercado, es que empezamos a pensar este nuevo proyecto.
Okay. So Andrea is showing images about the work that she has been doing with Andrea Miraji. ¿Está bien?
Alejandra Misraji.
Alejandra Miraji in the north of Argentina, that they also have been working with artisans. And here she wanted to talk about Alejandra as an artist, but also as a professor and as a researcher. And this is the work that they did, that is called Randeras del... Creo que perdí ahí el nombre.
Randeras del Cercado. La randa
Randeras
es una
del...
técnica, y las que hacen la randa son randeras.
Okay, so the work is called Randeras del Cercado, and this is the image.
Esta imagen que se ve aquí es un museo, la anterior, es un museo móvil de la randa. La randa es un tipo de encaje hecho a la aguja, artesanal. Y bueno, ahí empezamos a pensar en esta posibilidad de que los tejidos no necesariamente pues, tienen que ser valorados si si van adentro de una institución, de una sala, sino que se pueden hacer otros ejercicios, ¿no? Para poder mirarlos de otra manera y poder valorarlos de otra manera.
So here, this is a mobile museum that Andrea is showing about randa. Randa is a work that is done with a needle, almost like embroidery. And she also talks about how the work is not only important as we show it in a gallery space, but also how it also gain meaning, like in another spaces, in our showing spaces that can be integrated into the community itself.
Gracias. Entonces empezamos a trabajar con otros grupos, a convocar otros grupos de tejedoras. Alejandra venía trabajando con las randeras, yo venía trabajando con las mujeres wichí de Silat, y en esta foto, por ejemplo, hay otro grupo que se llama Tejedores Andinos. Entonces empezamos a buscar otros grupos que ya estaban trabajando y a convocarlos a ser parte de este proyecto, Textiles Semillas.
So Alejandra has been working with other groups of artisans. In this case, she's showing an image of another group of tejedores or weavers. And she also wanted to integrate more communities that can be part of the project, that Textiles Semillas or seed textiles.
Entonces ahora, bueno, lo que estamos haciendo es, hicimos una etapa de peregrinaje, le decimos nosotras, de viajar por las distintas comunidades, buscando a grupos de artesanas organizadas, y entonces no solo las invitamos a que sean parte de un proyecto, sino que nuestra meta es construir una unión de tejedoras, artistas y activistas.
So Alejandra and Andrea start like a peregrination process, as they call it, that is going to or travel to different places to find organized group of weavers that they can arrange a union or a community that can be integrated with weavers, artists, and artisans.
Bueno, y ahí a continuación pueden ver algunas imágenes de las visitas que hicimos, donde, bueno, fuimos conociendo a cada grupo y conociendo las técnicas con las que trabajan, y principalmente haciendo el ejercicio de escuchar qué es lo que ellas desean, ¿no? Qué es lo que imaginan para el futuro en relación a su trabajo como tejedoras, ¿no? ¿Qué
So
quieren
here
hacer?
you can see, here you can see some images about those visits, and mostly those visits were for understanding and learning the crafts that they do there, but also it was an opportunity to understand and listen them what the weavers want for their future and what they wanted to do with the work that they have been doing and they are gonna do with Andre and Alejandra.
Gracias. Entonces empezamos a imaginar qué podemos hacer juntas. Y a fin del mes de julio de este año hicimos esta exposición al aire libre titulada Textiles Semillas en un pequeño pueblo rural en la montaña, en Tucumán, donde se celebraba un encuentro de tejedoras que se viene haciendo hace mucho tiempo, hace más de 10 años, y nosotras nos sumamos al encuentro, también buscando estos circuitos alternativos en donde hablar, ¿no?, sobre la posibilidad de trabajar en el mundo del arte o hacer proyectos u obras interculturales, como que nos parece interesante visitar por un lado museos, galerías, y por otro lado probar estos ensayos en otros territorios.
So here you can see the exhibition, Textiles Semillas, or Seed Textiles, that they did in the countryside or in the hills, that it is called Tucumán. Here they join a meeting that has been done for 10 years ago. This was in the last July, sorry. And they joined a group of weavers that joined together since like 10 years ago. And here they wanted to experience and to talk with others about the possibility of integrate the art in the aspect of the weavers, and how it will be interesting to have an intercultural work too.
Gracias. Y bueno, y acá les dejo que nos pueden seguir en Instagram. Hemos creado una cuenta donde está todo, bueno, estamos tratando de que sea el archivo del proyecto, y también pueden encontrar enlaces para ver videos y conocer más sobre este proyecto que está en curso y que es apoyado por una institución de Berlín, Humboldt Forum. Está dentro de un programa que coordina el curador Michael de Minguier, que se llama 99 Questions, y vamos a seguir trabajando y se va a seguir transformando esto con los 12 grupos de tejedoras con los que estamos trabajando, y vamos a exponer esto el año que viene, bueno, en diferentes lugares de Argentina y finalmente en Berlín.
So here you have the social media of the project that Andrea is working with Alejandra. And this work has been supported by, sorry that I lost the names, Alejandra. Andrei, ¿me puedes repetir los nombres de quienes están apoyando el proyecto en Berlín, por favor?
El Humboldt Forum.
Sí.
Y el curador es Michael de Minguier, del programa 99 Questions.
1990. Okay, so this project has been supported by Humboldt Forum in Berlin, in Germany, and the curator of this work was Michael. And what they wanted to do next is to exhibit this in Argentina, to exhibit the work of 12 groups of weavers that they have been working with. And they also wanted to exhibit, they're going to exhibit this project in Berlin, Germany, too. So you are, feel free to follow them and see what is happening. Yeah.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, eso es un poco lo que quería compartir con ustedes. Si tienen alguna pregunta o después quieren escribirme y que les comparta más material, con todo gusto. Estamos haciendo todo esto para hacer conocer, ¿no?, el trabajo de todas estas mujeres que yo admiro profundamente y que desde mi lugar como curadora trato de apoyar para que su trabajo crezca y se difunda, y principalmente puedan, bueno, hacer saber, ¿no?, lo que significa para ellas y que sea valorado.
Thank you, Andre. So lastly, she said that the microphone. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Lastly, Andre said that she has been doing this work and try to spread the word that Textiles Semillas, so she can support the weavers that are behind this or really are doing this project. And she expects that we engage with that work and see why is important for the community to integrate this. Yeah, thank you very much, Andre. Gracias, gracias. So now we're gonna go to Palabreo session. That is gonna be a conversation, and we're gonna have some questions. But also, if the people who is in this Zoom call want to join, so feel free to send your questions. Could be in Spanish or in English. Don't worry. And yeah, thank you very much for our panelists today, Zayaan, Ana Maria, and Andre, for being here. And we hope that you can like interconnect everything that is happening here in this session, and that we can see how entangled and interconnected are the practices of our panelists. Yeah, thank you very much. So I open this session of Palabreo.
I have a first question maybe to Zayaan. So I'm intrigued about the seed bibliothèque. So different to other seed, because there's many people doing seed restoration or trying to keep seed for preservation senses, but I'm very interested in the human aspect and the stories behind how you are collecting these seeds. So I was curious to see if this is also applied to the way that you actually store them. Do you keep them in the same packages? How does that work? Also, how is this exchange? Can people take seeds and take other ones back? How are those interactions going on currently?
It's very emergent is the word, meaning that we have an intention and we have a what's the word? Like we have an ideal way that it will be successful, but the practicality and the reality can be very different. So I'm answering the second part first. In that we ideally we're doing it volume for volume. So if you come to the library and you want to take out some seed, or you want to take out a book, or you want to borrow one of the instruments, anything, then you need to either offer some kind of service in exchange, or bring back the following season the same amount of seed. So if you borrowed 5 seed, or if you borrowed a cup, whatever it is, that kind of volume. However, this has not happened yet. And so we're emergently seeing what the process is, because it's so exciting. And it's like when we deal with seed and we work with seed, it becomes this whole world of possibility. You get people, and it's a practice here where people will just take everything. And so we have to kind of set parameters. And now we're thinking, okay, maybe we need to do some kind of membership. So it works and it doesn't work, but we always have seed, and we always know where the seed is going. So it's not like we're losing anything. And every seed swap or seed event, there's new people. So this means this proves to us that the community of practice is growing and growing. Oh no, I forgot the first part of the question. Please remind me, Lisa,
if you were doing anything special on the way you store them, like these packages come with a
great
side, what are you doing with that?
So we document everything, take photos of everything, even if it's just with a cell phone. Everyone wants high-res photos, but we don't have that kind of equipment. So that at least it's documented in an archive somewhere, digitally archived. But what we then do is we have a lot of ash, and we prepare, if it's seed that needs to be stored for longer than a season or two, we will fill it with ash. So cover the seed with ash, sometimes chili powder, depending on the seed. Beans are more susceptible to, and grains are more susceptible to weevils than others. a lot of the seed is smoked first. We come from a region where smoked seed needs to be smoked to be germinated in terms of indigenous seed. And so we prepare it in that way, and then we store it in ash. So sometimes if it means there's a small amount of seed, then we will cover it in ash and then put it back in the bag, for example. But ideally, we want to keep it in something that can be sterilized or in clay. We haven't gotten there yet. So most of the stuff is in jars, but it's ash. That's the way that we roll. Clean ash, and then usually like it's fig leaves or it's wood ash, and things that we have in our, that we can get to burn, that doesn't take away, you know, we've made fires during the season or something. Ideally in the future, though, we will have made clay pots for all the different seed, and then we would have like a test, like a sample amount of the not archived, but the stuff in the back of the library, so that people can have easy access to see what it is. Maybe they've got the same thing or they have stories about it, so that we can log more, diversify the stories for the storytelling.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's
okay. Many things. Like, first of all, thanks to Andre, to Zayaan, and to Anna. It's really inspiring. And I mean, this question is focused on Zayaan, but it's touching like some points to Andre's talk, and it's you know, like this idea of what's behind that. You know, it's not all of the you know, like the seeds per se, or the textile objects that they are making, but it's the process. No, it's this idea of exchange that, for example, Zayaan is basically was explaining us, like how the you know, like just dealing with seeds or or exchanging seeds is just like a dynamic of meanings for everyone. And so the question for me is I mean, right now we are with this idea of exchanging knowledge, and it's like it's something that, for example, in Colombia and in different countries from the South, I will say, it's very important for us. You know, it's this idea of trust. It's this idea of I will give you something, you can give me something, and because and those things are valuable for me. But you know, right now that, you know, like from the north, and this like most of the academies and most of the institutions are trying to see our you know, like these very, very sensitive logics, and how we operate in this side of the world. You know, how can we find like in between spaces? Can we deal with this idea of appropriation when, you know, when this with a change it doesn't work, you know, and during the history and during colonialism is that thing, you know, it's just is basically to create a space of trust, but it's not a trust space. It's just, you know, like a way to appropriate something from everyone. So yeah, I would like to ask you how we can you know, like based on all of and all of the activities and all of the workshops and all of the gatherings, in order to preserve and to give a meaning to all of the seeds, how can we very careful you know, with this idea, with, you know, with this process?
If I understand correctly, my way of answering would be, in our colonial narrative, our inherited colonial narrative, which is also, the ducks have moved in, which is also kind of this urban development narrative, has placed such an emphasis on time as money and value of time in a very particular paradigm, which is not how time exists. So it's kind of structured us and put our ideologies into this space-time fabric that urges us to live under crisis, under crises, and with stress. And a simple tool, which is an indigenous way of being, is with listening to the land. Here we call it la lela, deep listening, listening without hearing, or listening without sound, I guess. It's that thing of, you know, the Kemets, the pre-ancient Egyptians spoke about 360 senses, whereas now we just understand that we have 5. But they're all different ways of hearing and all different ways of seeing. And so if we, as a modern practice, if you shift your lens to thinking about something, for example, if I want to understand the world and I do it through the seed, and I put the seed at the center instead of the self or the person, and I pay mind and I pay attention to who is with the seed, and who does the seed need, and starting to build or hear those narratives and build a paradigm around that, as opposed to my dramas or myself or the very patriarchal notions of what we're supposed to know and how we're supposed to operate. It really helps to shift that way of being, of such a strict time as money way, to thinking about plant time, you know, and really dealing with it from that perspective, because those are modalities that are so interconnected and connected with so many other ways of being alive, outside of human, beyond human, more than human, with waters and fungi and bacterias and spirits and healing and ancient ways, prehistoric ways. It really helps you to fail also, succeed also, but trip up into the spaces of those in-betweens and those liminal spaces and those Nepantlas and the borderlands and the ecotones and the thin spaces of hyperdiversity that teach us so much. So it's a trick or a tool. And often, one last thing I want to say about that is that when we're in those times of crises, and when that panic or the stress and stuff kicks in, it really helps to be very self-aware. And I don't know if this is just a neurodivergent thing, but to be very hyperly self-aware, to know what my body in my moment, how my body is responding to that time. For me, I hold my breath, I stop breathing. Other people will like scratch their faces, or they'll, I don't know, do whatever they need to do. So for me, I understand that the way that when I feel stress and time is money and I'm running out of time, and I watch myself and I stop breathing, just breathing again reminds me that I'm not running out of time. Time is infinite. There is so much time. Time doesn't have a beginning or an end. And just shifting that mental capacity, that spiritual knowing, the practice, the praxis that involves that. And by doing so, you kind of build very steadily a cultural, like a me and my cultural way of knowing, and in my broader community of family and friends and colleagues and others that live in the same space and time as me, begin to build that community of practice. Either way, you know what I mean?
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you, Zayaan.
Andre, we have a question here from Ezequiel Lovrovich. So I'm going to read it in Spanish and then I'm going to read it in English. Entonces, una pregunta para André, y el proyecto siempre refiere a tejedoras, por el cual es la presencia de, refiere a tejedoras, pero ¿cuál es la presencia de tejedores varones en el proyecto? ¿Tienen también su presencia o es un campo únicamente trabajo por mujeres? ¿Hay alguna opinión al respecto desde la perspectiva de los grupos de tejedoras? Muchas gracias, y dice que conocía el proyecto por redes y me parece súper interesante. Saludos desde Córdoba. So Ezequiel here has a question for André. He wants to know about the presence of weavers, especially being mostly women. So he's asking for if there are men weavers and what do the women weavers believe about this. And so he's a bit intrigued about that, and he's from Córdoba, Argentina, so he's been following André's project for a while.
Bueno, gracias, Ezequiel. Hay tejedores varones en el norte de Argentina, sobre todo en la parte de las montañas, en la zona andina y en los valles de altura, pero nosotras estamos trabajando solamente con mujeres por ahora, porque bueno, es ahí donde hace foco nuestro proyecto. Nos parece que también, bueno, esta metáfora de la semilla, el tejido, pensarlo como semilla es pensar en todo lo que hay que comprender para hacer que algo crezca, de frutos, se reproduzca, y principalmente el ejercicio de cuidado, ¿no? Para que eso suceda. Entonces, bueno, hicimos foco en el trabajo de las mujeres y nuestro trabajo de cuidado mutuo o crianza mutua, como dice Elvira Espejo, que es alguien que es una gran referente para nosotras.
Okay, so André, she's explaining that there are a lot of weavers that are men, mostly in the mountainous regions of Argentina. I can add that mostly doing ponchos and that specific technique. But this project was specifically chosen to work with groups of women weavers that are already working as a group. And the idea behind this is also the symbological aspect of weaving and the metaphor in relation to seeds, which have to have a lot of care and taking care of them for them to grow and nourish. And so in that metaphor, they chose to work with women and that nature of caring as part of the project. And they also are great followers of the work of Elvira Espejo. I don't know if I should add anything else. André, ¿algo más? ¿Quieres que conteste?
No, gracias. Gracias por la traducción.
Okay, I also have a question for André. So again, I'm gonna ask it in English and in Spanish. But the main question is how you conceive the art, not as an art, like by definition and by a Western definition, and how you can integrate that meaning into the communities that you work with. And also, my question is to know how you have these conversations with them, and if you have it or not, and what that means for them to be part of all the multiple exhibitions that you have been talking about. Yeah, I'm interested about that because it's something that is really deep into our Western view of the world, like defining us as an artist or not, and if that implies community or individuals, and how we can break that or unlearn that and work as a community. Ahora, André, esta pregunta está más orientada a el trabajo que has venido haciendo con el grupo de tejedoras en relación a la definición de arte y cómo logras también, pues mi pregunta está cómo podemos romper con esa definición del artista y más bien integrarlo desde una manera de trabajo en comunidad, y cómo has llevado estas conversaciones también con las tejedoras, porque sé que desde esta parte hablo también por mí misma, como he estado educada desde una visión de la definición y del artista, de la artista, y siento que tu trabajo con las tejedoras ha sido cambiar un poco esta visión o cambiarla completamente, o a veces como un tira y afloje, como tú das, yo doy, para lograr el trabajo que has logrado. Entonces, sí, si quieres saber cómo te has podido conectar con ellas, si has tenido conversaciones como en relación a esto.
Sí, gracias por esta pregunta. Sí, para nosotros es un punto clave esto que mencionás, porque si bien hemos podido avanzar en esto de habitar o ocupar el territorio del arte, y también poder que las personas indígenas, sobre todo, puedan pensar, o sea, puedan conocer primero a qué nosotros le llamamos arte, y en relación a eso, pensar cómo ellas se pueden involucrar con eso. Ha habido mucha aceptación de las obras indígenas en el mundo del arte, las que pudimos presentar, pero a la hora de cuando aparece la posibilidad de comercializar esas obras, nos piden que sean artistas individuales, ¿no? El mercado. Y de hecho, una de las chicas empezó a presentar como artista, que es Claudia Alarcón. Entonces, lo que nosotros estamos proponiendo ahora es, vamos a hacer la semana que viene una exposición en Londres, en una galería, va Claudia Alarcón, pero también va el grupo de tejedoras, porque ella no se puede pensar sola, porque es una mujer que pertenece a un pueblo y las imágenes que ella produce, si bien puede hacer nuevas composiciones, siempre están hechas con la técnica con la que teje su pueblo y usando patrones que pertenecen a la memoria colectiva. Lo mismo que la propiedad, o sea, no existe la idea de propiedad privada entre las comunidades, sino que se defiende la propiedad comunitaria. Entonces, ese es el desafío que tenemos ahora. ¿Cómo se defiende esa, entre comillas, propiedad comunitaria de las imágenes? Yo en relación a eso estoy pensando como una forma de nombrar directamente vinculada a esta experiencia, que la estoy aprendiendo, de también escuchar el pensamiento de diferentes personas, de diferentes grupos, que tiene que ver con una autoría fluida, ¿no? Como que el cuerpo es a veces habitado por otras energías vitales, no necesariamente humanas, y que pueden venir de otros tiempos. Entonces las imágenes que produce un cuerpo no corresponden solo a la persona, o sea, Andrei en este caso, mi cuerpo tiene un número de documento, pero mi cuerpo puede hacer cosas que exceden a mi tiempo de vida. Entonces, ¿cómo pensamos las imágenes? ¿A quién le pertenecen si tenemos en cuenta todo eso?
Wow. I'm going to
Thank you.
try and translate
Yeah, okay.
this the best I can. Okay, so there are many challenges to being able to show this work in a traditional artistic world concept. So mostly all of the work is done by the community as a group. And even though some of the works are mostly done by one person, they still carry the collective knowledge and the symbolism and images of the whole community. So the art world tries to consider the artist as an individual. So when showing the artworks, it's been very successful, and the pieces, but naturally when it goes to the sales aspect of it, people or collectors want to buy it as an authorship of a one-person art piece. So Andrei and Textil Semilla, they're trying to see how they can communicate this in a different way, and how can they keep the original way of making in these communities, that is a group work, because the symbolisms are all part of the historical symbological universe that they carry from past lives and all their past ancestors. And Andres very much focused on a way of thinking that bodies or fluid authorship is the word she used, that bodies are kind of, in a way, vessels for past knowledge that can be transmitted. So it's not just about the person, but about what this body is being able to enact. So it's very, the idea of authorship is very fluid. So yeah, I think, I'm not sure if I said everything, but okay.
Yeah, I think you did. Thank you. It's very inspiring. Yeah, and it's a big challenge too.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting concept. And also challenging. But
I have a last question to close a little bit this first season, and it's target to Zayaan. I went through different texts and materials that we were like reviewing before this meeting, and I got very interested in one of the concepts that you were explaining, the idea of this we rather than being as a unique being, like we were talking about bodies, instead of being a person, we are a kind of mosaic of different organisms cohabitating and happening at the same time. So instead of being a solely one subject, we are kind of them, this a kind of entanglement of species. So my question is, to make it in simple, how this idea could change the reality we inhabit, and we accept. How this could be changed, what we understand, this idea of we are not like individuals, like unique individuals. Instead, we are literally a collaboration of beings.
It helps to for me, it helps to feel less alone, to be honest, in the rat races that we're taught we need to be chasing. Because I was never very good at hustling to make money. You know, I can work and I'm a very hard worker, but the objective has never really been to stack cash. I'm just using this as an example. And so in the constant effort to reckon with my own sense of ethics and my own sense of goodness in the world, I don't know, to be kind and to not live an entirely extractive life, to understand the self as a community, and the self, my children are screaming in the background, to understand myself as community, in community with others, but also in community of self. So as an ecosystem. So a lot of the work that I do and a lot of the interpretation of these concepts and these notions, it helps me to do it through fermentation as a practice, because immediately you can't ferment anything without bacteria and yeast and fungi, you know? And then, of course, when we're talking about fermenting food, you can't do that with the different species. You can't do it without the different species that we harvest to lay, for example, in salt or to lay in honey and ferment over time. And so there's these beautiful examples of, you know, you leave a jar on the shelf for 2 weeks, for a month, and what you've started off with is you end off with something completely different. So I like to talk about it in terms of death making, where we have, for example, with plants, we harvest the plant, in the harvesting, we begin its death process, so it's no longer growing. And then that death process, we sink it into salt water, then it meets all these bacteria, for example. And the bacteria, once the oxygen has been cut off, the reproduction proliferates at such a rapid rate that by the end of 3 or 4 weeks, you've got trillions of individuals in that jar. And those, whatever, apples that you put in the jar with the salt and the water is so much more alive than when it was alive. It's so much more alive in its death than when it was alive. And so these kind of concepts and decentering the self, it's that constant practice of decentering the self. It helps to do it that way, and it helps to think about it in those ways. For me, first and foremost, because I'm prone to depression, it really helps to think about it in terms of not being alone, and that there's so much more, especially in terms of our timescales and our learned senses of timescales. If we think about bacteria, they've been here since the beginning, since billions of years ago. And then it helps me conceptualize where I come from, in my prehistoric ancient ancestry, and to the potential of where I'm going. And it helps to stop the fear that comes from living under crises. If that answers the question.
Thank you very much. Elisa, you were... No?
No, I think we have to kind of, I'm sorry, but close up, and because of the time limit of the Zoom also. But thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the panelists. I think you have a lot of things in common, and I hope you can connect between each other later on. I don't know, just to talk, keep on the Palabreo going. Zayaan, beautiful listening to you and all your way of thinking. So thank you very much to everyone who has been here, and I hope you have enjoyed and taken a lot of information to keep on thinking and interacting with. So yes, and thank you, New York Textile Month, for allowing us this space to be here.